all social networks today, they're not allowing the academic into the club. They're allowing the lunatic or the nutcase into the club because they know that that's going to sell more drinks, okay, or more food or more whatever. And in this case, more ads. This is going to be the first time in history where we're actually going to measure the will of the people on a daily basis, every person, every day.
My name is Mark Kealey. My colleague and partner on this show, Guillermo Cruzrico, is on vacation. I'm really delighted today to introduce a very interesting topic with a very interesting person. We're going to talk today about something that's on everybody's mind. We hear this at almost every dinner table, every restaurant, every library, every public place. People are talking about politics. They're talking about government. They're talking about democracy. There's an interesting platform being introduced to the world in the coming weeks. I'm very excited about this. And I'm very, I'll say this, honestly too, I'm involved in this organization with my wonderful friend and guest today, Murray Simser, who's the CEO and founder of Citizen. Listen, Murray, thanks for being here, by the way.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
No, it's good to have you on the show. I was really excited to have this conversation with you. Not only are you a very energetic guy, but you seem to have this no-nonsense ideal about what we need to do to change democracy. Look, you've known me for a long time. You know that politics is a very strong suit of mine. I like public policy. I like to make things change. And I know that oftentimes government is really important to some people, but it's becoming more and more remote. And I think you've seen that in the platform that you've done. Let's delve a little bit into what Citizen is.
Yes.
And before we get into the whole idea about Citizen, why did you call it Citizen?
First off, again, thank you for having me
Sure.
on. I delight in having these types of conversations because anything I can do to get this message out, I think is going to help the people. Fundamentally, the reason I called it Citizen is because the original concept of citizenship, the concept of a civic duty, I believe has been lost. Mm-hmm. And it's been replaced with a set of toys like social media and entertainment that passes as news. And this has created what I'll call the zeitgeist of our day. That was not what citizenship was meant to be. The whole nationalist movements, post-empire, post-monarchical movements, starting in the United States and then even in Canada down at the National Club on Bay Street, where the Canadian identity, for instance, was created, and many other countries, that national identity was meant to be a taking control, être maître chez nous, to use the Quebec term. The concept of being masters in your own home requires that you do your civic duty. And that starts with good citizenship. And citizenship is the active participation in a democracy.
So let's dig into this. I mean, those are motherhood statements.
They really are.
And I think a lot of people say, yeah, I think I do have a role to play, but how do I do this? And what is it are you selling me something? And we talk about Citizen being a platform. Yep. Talk to me about the technological platform you have as Citizen.
100%. And in fact, they are motherhood statements because they give us sort of the guidance that we use to build the technology platform that's sort of in place. The fundamental organizing principle behind Citizen, which informs all the technical decisions we then made, was we no longer live in a society where the people have informed consent. And informed consent implies that A, somebody knows what's going on, and B, somebody can then, once they know what's going on, opine about what's going on. Neither of these two things exist in our democracies today, right across the planet, okay? The Economist Intelligence Unit measures all the nominal democracies in the world. It's about 4.5 billion people that are in nominal democracies. The rest are in totalitarian, anocratic, or various levels of non-democratic statehood. In those states, there's not a single one that has sort of what you would call an active civic environment.
Right.
We grew up with the concept of taking a civics class and understanding that it was your duty to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And in fact, you being one of the architects of a lot of the political structures in Canada over time, you understand how that changed from an active democracy to a passive democracy. In your time, you had to reach out to Canadians when you were running, say, Turner stuff. You had to get out there and you had to get into cities and villages and towns,
Right.
and you had to engage with the democracy. You don't have to do that today. It doesn't matter to a politician any of that. When one post on a social network can get 20 million views, why would you bother going to Red Deer? Okay, why would you even care what people outside of whatever your own little world is? And this has broken the system, regrettably. Because what it means is the representative government, where that MP or in other countries, members of legislative assemblies or Congresses, those people were meant to represent where they came from.
Right.
That's not the case anymore. The parties and the premierships of every country, the presidents, the prime ministers, the office of that group knows precisely how to, quote, market to people in a democracy today. And we've replaced democratic infrastructure, which was supposed to be bottom-up grassroots, which was the original intention behind democracy, with a marketing team. Now, I don't have to tell you that a marketing team's job is to splice off the largest pieces they can target for the least amount of cost. I heard somebody after the last election, for instance, in one of the countries in North America, saying the efficiency of our vote getting.
Yes.
My jaw dropped. If that's how the premierships or presidencies or congressmen or whatever see the people as just meat, it's not a society I want to live in. And so I built, to answer your question now, a technology that looks a lot like a social network. It's sort of like LinkedIn is to business, Twitter is to news, Facebook is to social, what Citizen is going to be to politics. And what it's going to do fundamentally is using a construct that nobody has to be trained to use. Everybody knows how to use a social network.
Right.
This one's going to be about your democracy. It's going to tell you all about your democracy, whether it's Mexico or Canada or any other country in the world that wants to use it. They will be able to actively know what's going on in their government. That was test one I said before.
Okay.
And the second thing they're going to do is they're going to be able to opine once they've understood the subject matter. Okay? This creates the conditions that are best expressed by the Stanford study, America in One Room,
Right.
where they proved that it doesn't matter how fancy you are, how rich you are, how powerful you are. It only matters that you have objective information to understand a problem at the right moment, and then you give your opinions. And people will give their opinions, meaning this social network will capture everybody's opinion every day.
So is Citizen an aggregator of government information? Is it an aggregator of media and policy? And does it put it on a website that people can go to?
Yeah, and you know what? In one sense, we are literally turning the government of every country into a simple little app on a phone.
Okay.
So the first thing it does is, for instance, in Canada, we have the legislative calendar. So you start with the speech from the throne and you end at something like prorogation, okay? And in between, you have a parliament. That is bookended by processes and policies and fancy stuff and committees and all kinds of work. We make it simple enough that normal people can participate in government. And we show it to them in that app so they can understand it visually.
So if what I'm hearing you say is at the beginning of a legislative process, you're going to say, hey, look, this is what's going to happen throughout the course of this.
That's right. Speech from the throne will be...
And I'm going to help you understand what's going on. So if something gets passed into law, you know now why it's been passed into law.
Not just I know why, but I actively participated in the machinations that go on in committees. So for instance, how to change it a little bit at the beginning. First reading, second reading, you know, the Senate wants to make changes. Well, the Senate wants to make changes. We should be telling the Senate what changes we want. And if we want to have changes in the second reading in the House, we need to tell the MPs in the House or in any other legislature in any other country, the people in that country need to be able to follow, know what's going on, and simply share their point of view. And it's made easy by the technology.
So your technology allows a person to sign on to Citizen.
Yes.
They become a member of Citizen.
Correct.
And they get information passed on to them, but they get the ability to say, hey, look, I want to give you my opinion.
That's right.
Ah, very interesting.
So instead of hearing about somebody's breakfast, okay, what if you got a notification that said, hey, there's a first reading in the House, this bill's important, pay attention for 1 minute. You read a 1-minute paragraph of stuff, you have all the information that you need, and then you are asked a series of questions that are created by an objective third party. that creates these things. Not us, not some politician, not somebody who's biased, but somebody who has a vested interest in the objectivity of that information, validated by a body of politic that is credible. And you then give your opinion.
And do you have to be a voter to be on Citizen?
Yes, you do. As a matter of fact, there's two classes of people in a country. There are residents and there are citizens. Okay?
Right.
Depending on the country that you live in, there are different levels of active participation that are allowed at law. And so you can only allow at law what is allowed in each country. So Canada would be different than Mexico, would be different than Costa Rica, would be different than Brazil. And so if you think about it in those sort of terms, we're going to follow the law. We're going to capture everybody's opinion, including people from 13 to 18 years old, which we call the young political crew. You know, in Canada, we have parties that have young branches of them, for instance, United States, young Democrats, young Republicans, etc. And so when you think about those sorts of things, we'll capture everybody's opinion. But certain opinions will be graded differently based on what a politician cares about. So somebody who can vote will obviously have a higher weighting than somebody who can't. Okay,
sure.
And that's just reflecting the structure. But we're not making a judgment about the value of each of those. We are capturing each of those, so we know what a resident thinks because they pay taxes, they're here, they live in the country. What if they're migrant workers? Lots of migrant workers come here and spend years here and never go home. Shouldn't they have a bloody say in what's going on? I think so. But I don't think that they can have a say in the current structure. And so when you capture the youth, you capture the residents, and you capture the citizens, and you just express those as factual pieces of information rather than judgments about whether or not they're first or second class citizens, what you end up with is a more fulsome view of what the population wants. And let me just say this. Our modus operandi is very simple. You can't do anything if you can't measure it. This is going to be the first time in history where we're actually going to measure the will of the people on a daily basis, every person, every day.
So let me challenge you, because you've got Twitter, and you've got LinkedIn, and you've got Facebook.
Yes.
And I'll use Facebook. I see on Facebook now tons of politicians are using Facebook.
Oh, yes, they are.
Tons of politicians are using Twitter. And if that's indeed the case, what I see invariably is that they'll say, here's my point of view as a politician, and I'm going to gauge the effectiveness of my point of view by how many likes I'm going to get.
100%. And that is the current model.
That's the current model.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between that and what you're proposing?
So the first and most important point is, if that's the measure, you end up with the concentration of power that we talked about right now. Because if I can actually get, as I say, 20,000 likes on something, why would I bother turning up to an event at a Legion in the middle of a small village?
Right.
Because I don't care. And I'm not saying I don't care. I'm saying if I were the politician, my vested interest has no bearing on me turning up at a village meet. Okay? Nothing. Which means you become disaffected from people. You're not really a politician at that point, you're a marketer. And I think that problem is the reason that this way of thinking, our way, achieves something different and better. So the question is, what is it that's different in this case? Will you not get likes? Of course you'll get likes. I mean, things will be on here. But the first rule is the politicians aren't invited to Citizen. This has nothing to do with the politicians. This is the sixth estate. And by sixth estate, I mean this is the people's forum.
Right.
Politicians will not show up. They will not have a profile. Of course, a politician is a citizen. So if you were a politician, let's say you were MP Mark Kealey, you're not MP Mark Kealey and citizen. You're Mark Kealey citizen. You're no different than me or anybody else on the Citizen platform. This is about capturing people's opinion, not allowing politicians to manipulate and form opinions.
How do you do this? Say you look at Facebook and you look at Twitter. It says this is the official Twitter page of the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. So he gets his own Twitter page. This is the official Twitter handle of the President of the United States. That gives it a tremendous amount of weight.
Yes.
How would you do that in this particular case?
We wouldn't do it at all. They're not invited. So we don't want them to show up. We're not interested in having them show up. We don't want celebrities on our platform. First off, there are about 50 Donald Trump accounts on Twitter.
Okay.
There are 50 Trudeau accounts. There's 50, any politician in the world, you don't know what's real or fake.
Right.
Okay? So this is sort of the other problem. They can keep doing what they're doing, but in the end, that's a broken model, fundamentally. And since the data that is as you rightly pointed out, being used for its powerful purpose, that is to manipulate the sort of minds of people to achieve policy objective, which, fair enough, that was the goal. It's just become so easy to do now that we've forgotten about the people in the process. Like we've really thrown them off the boat.
Do people know that they're inconsequential to these platforms?
No, they don't. And in fact, if you look at the behavior of people as the best indicator, I would argue that not only do they not know, they really think they matter. Because they're increasing the spend of time per day on the platform, frankly, whining about government policies that nobody will ever listen to. But, as you rightly pointed out, a politician will love to hop into a wedge issue or something that is divisive and say, yeah, that boogeyman over there, or this, we're going to blame this one, or that's the scapegoat. That's the only thing politicians do on Facebook and Twitter and the rest of them, because, and let's remember this, in the fight between Elon Musk and Twitter, the foundational issue is, are the people on the platform real? And the answer is, by and large, they're not.
And he said that.
He said not only did he say it, but Twitter couldn't prove otherwise. And so
a judge gave rendered an opinion that suggested, well, you've got to do this because...
No, he's got to do the due diligence. I'm not going to speak to the legal reality of that, but I'll say this. The simple fact that nobody knows on Twitter, this was my takeaway,
right?
That nobody knows on Twitter who's real or fake is the problem. Because when you take a Mark Kealey who posts on Facebook or on Twitter, Mark Kealey's Mark Kealey. And Mark Kealey has his way of thinking and his way of thinking.
Right.
But if 9 out of 10 people on a platform are not a real person, first off, they're bots, they're fake people, they're people pretending to people, they're rented accounts from real people. Like the estimates range from something like 1/4 to 2 to 3/4 of all social media accounts are baloney.
This is in the billions you're talking about.
Well, since there's 5 or 6 billion social media users on Earth, you start to think about those percentages. If 25 to 6, these are the range of. If 25 to 75%, depending on the platform, it's different. So LinkedIn has a really high percentage of quality accounts. Okay?
Yes.
And that's the cultural issue in business. You don't put your breakfast on business and think you're going to get the contract. It just doesn't happen.
And LinkedIn's got some cachet to that.
Facebook has no such culture. Twitter has no such culture. These things are dumpster fires, okay? And at the end of the day, the only people paying for those dumpster fires are the people. Because politicians can now, and you can't blame them, because if I was a politician, my job is to get attention and to get support.
Let's talk about Facebook and Twitter. I hate to give them this kind of attention.
Let's give them the airtime.
But how do they make money?
Well, they sell ads. And so what that means is more time on their platform equals more ads sold. It's that simple.
So it's the same concept as television.
It's identical to this thing. If you think about Nielsen's ratings and all that stuff, there's no difference. The difference, though, is this. Television, there were only certain channels available. Licensees bought them. They were subject to a range of sort of what I'll call capital issues, meaning that if there are 4 shows on TV and they're all competing, there's only 4 output places for the information, okay? So you had a couple of American broadcasters, a couple of Mexican broadcasters, a couple of Canadian broadcasters. That's it. Those guys were competing on a quality basis. So they were trying to one-up each other. Then we had, and back then it was who had the highest quality news. Then we had the 1,000-channel universe before the internet. And all of a sudden we started to get internet-based news, which was entertainment passing as news. And now all of a sudden you have these new entrants that took sides, okay? Or it became parody or it became other. And then the internet comes along and it completely eliminates the cost of entry. Everybody can broadcast today on anything without cost. And the consequence is the loudest, bloodiest, most brutal, most emotional, most insulting thing, and this is science, okay? This is an actual study, will always outclass truth and honesty and reality, because that's not how the human brain's wired. The human brain is wired for fear, and it's wired for fight or flight, and it's wired for these things. And so these social networks are priming people to keep them on the platform. And if you look at the trend line, the amount of time that somebody spends on the platform is systematically going up to 4 hours a day or something.
Yes.
That makes television time look like a joke. Back in the boob tube days, this sort of The thesis behind social media is keep them on as long as you possibly can. And as a consequence, I can sell more ad space in my auction engine on the backside.
So for all intents and purposes, Facebook and Twitter are saying, I'm going to go to General Motors. I'm going to say, look, I've got 5 billion users, and we can talk about your new EV.
That's right. We can give you a package of marketing, and you can get this many impressions.
And it's almost guaranteed because people are going to look at that.
Guaranteed. It absolutely works because there's nothing better.
So you're competing against this?
In a manner of speaking, I will be, but it's not actually me. The interesting thing about Citizen is it's going to be ultimately owned by the people.
So I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
So you're going to be, for all intents and purposes, a different platform because if I'm on Facebook, it's Zuckerberg that gets all that.
That's right.
If I'm on Twitter, it's these guys that Musk wants to.
That's right. Or Musk.
Or Musk. Those are the owners of this. So the people who are on Twitter, the people who are on Facebook, get no value except just.
That's correct. In fact, all of the value is created by the entrepreneurs, which is great.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't want to jump on social media. That's important. Yes, the downside is what we're talking about.
Yes.
But you do realize that every single day I make a post, I can talk to 10,000 people and it costs me nothing. The improvement in communications technology brought about by social media is the single largest change in communication technology history of the planet. It's that powerful. And the only reason people are so upset about it is because it's that powerful. Okay? Nothing makes somebody so crazy as something that has completely displaced entire industries, newspaper, it totally changed the world. Now, when you change anything, there's going to be a downside. Nuclear power, for instance, gives unlimited power, and then we had nukes. Okay, all technology is a double-edged sword. So it's really a question of how we use it that's important. And right now, those models have become sort of they've been captured in their own efficiency.
Yes.
Their efficiency is so great that now they have a question of quality that they have to manage, and I'm sure they'll get to it at some point.
Right.
I think that this sort of Musk Twitter thing is sort of the tip of that iceberg. Everybody now knows there's a question about, is it baloney accounts all over the place? And the truth is, all researchers, just go look it up, they're mostly baloney accounts. And that's the problem.
Interesting. So let's talk about you for a second.
Sure.
You call yourself a bit of a techno geek. I've heard you say this.
Oh, yeah.
So how did you get into this kind of a business? And how did you get from where you were to Citizen?
Well, I took a bit of a circuitous route. When I had a lot of my early career was just sheer dumb luck, okay? I ended up at Ottawa U, and this gave me access to the Liberal Party here in Canada, and I became a little political kid that was attached to a couple MPs, leadership campaigns, election campaigns, investitures, these sorts of things. So as a young man, I worked at Parliament in Canada, in Ottawa, as volunteer in the official leader of the opposition's office, in Mac Harb's office, and a variety of other places, Dennis Mills, and these sorts of things. And that wouldn't mean anything to our more international audience, but it means that I was a kid who understood politics, okay? And by the end of my school time, I was done with that. I wanted to move on. I wanted to be a banker. I ended up working for a company that got bought by a mid-stage buyout firm in San Francisco, which is Silicon Valley. So Menlo Park's where all the money is.
Yes.
That funds. Okay. I end up down in California as a 24-year-old, and now I'm exposed to something I'd never even heard of before: venture capital, private equity, all of these different concepts and this whole innovation ecosystem that boggled my mind.
Sure.
Okay? I eventually went on to become a dot-com founder in the dot-com period. I did one of the very first CRM companies in the cloud. We were doing cloud in 1999, 2000. When there were no clouds available. We had to build our own clouds. So that meant we had to build servers and racks and all the rest of it and sell on a subscription basis our service through a browser. Today, that's utterly normal. That was
And
not
CRM
normal
is
20 years ago.
CRM is a customer retention.
It's customer relationship management software. Any company uses it in their call centers and their
Right.
tellers and anytime you interact with a corporation, it's the database that they use to interact with. Oh, when you phone, say, Rogers when the thing
Yes.
went down, or you phone a telecom company or Telmex or whomever, you're going to end up speaking to somebody. They're going to look you up. They look you up in a CRM system. So that's what that is. But the point is that experience was my introduction to innovation. So politics first, Then I'm into innovation. Then I end up at Microsoft at the headquarters in Seattle, where I'm doing innovation stuff. We're integrating bot companies into the commercial environment globally. So, I've gone up the innovation food chain. I end up back in Canada doing a bunch of public companies, startup companies, an AI company. I did an agriculture company. I did a variety of other things that are kind of interesting. And the last company I did, the government collapsed the whole industry with their policies around how they were going to allow distribution to take place in that thing. And the consequence of their dithering was $100 billion wiped off the balance sheets of Canadian investors. And I lost it.
Of course.
Because I was one of the CEOs that had just raised a huge pile of money to back these companies on behalf of my investors. Now, all of Bay Street felt this, Bay Street being Canada's sort of financial sector. We felt this thing. And that was the moment my two worlds collided. Innovation, how am I going to fix this? Because I was angry. And I remember phoning a lot of my friends and telling them I was angry. Like, how are you going to change it? You're never going to change it. Well, guess what? 3 years later, I'm here. It's changed. And on September 28th, the world is going to start to be people-powered. And the reason it's going to be people-powered is because cuckoo innovator geek guy and ex-political hack used to, work the phones and do all the rest of it, finally figured out how to bring those two worlds together to solve the world's greatest problem, which is our failing democracies. And citizens the means.
Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk a bit about failing democracies and your September 28th deal. We'll be right back. Stay with us. So I'm talking today to Murray Simser, and we've had an interesting first part of the show talking about the evolution of these kinds of platforms,
right,
and how Citizen, your new platform, has taken shape. You made a comment before the break about how democracies are failing.
Yes.
And I think to a person, look, I'm just, we hear it oftentimes anecdotally. We're seeing it on television. We're seeing it we're reading about it in media, hearing it on radio, and even on social media, that something's not right with democracy right now. And, I'm hearing things like there's a dearth of good politicians. We're hearing that here in Canada. We're certainly hearing that in the United States.
Yep.
We're hearing that in UK and other places. And we're hearing that democracies are challenged, and so much so that we could be faced with what's happening in Ukraine. We could be faced with what potentially could happen in future in Russia. Yeah. And you're seeing the world. I want to preface this, Murray, because if you look at things like the Western world or the Western democracies, the G7 versus, say, BRICS nations.
Sure.
And I think it's really interesting that, you got Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa saying, well, you know what? We could attract democracies, or we could attract countries in Latin America. We could attract countries throughout Africa. We could attract countries throughout Asia to join this. And you're seeing that's linked too by things like social media.
Yes.
You're seeing that that's linked by sort of for platforms where people have an opportunity to say things and to either affect or input on change.
Yes.
Does Citizen have the power to do things like that in any country, anywhere in the world?
The short answer is absolutely. The longer answer is, why is that happening?
Right.
And I think that, a bit of a, for the audience, just a bit of a history that informed our structure. The printing press was the last time something of this scale happened that destabilized entire nations. Okay, up until recently, that hadn't happened since the printing press. Right. Television didn't do it. Telegraph didn't do it. I mean, none of these things really had the reach of the printing press. And now we've got an effect curve, if you want to measure its consequences socially, meaning the sort of nobody follows what is traditionally considered authority anymore. They're now into what are considered new authority models that have nothing to do with what went for, good countrying before in the sort of Westphalian ethic. The underlying problem is that when technology is sufficiently advanced in a social sense, the traditional authority pools fall away in favor of new authority pools. The problem is not that. That's okay. That's evolution. The problem is, what if the new authority pools are not benevolent? And when you have a non-benevolent new authority pool that has an interest that perhaps isn't aligned with yours, this is where you start to get this problem that you're seeing globally, okay? This mega shift away, these sort of macro trends where you're seeing these mega shifts of countries away from what is nominally supposed to be what is in their best interest to something that is obviously and academically not in their best interest, and yet it speaks to them.
So, can I infer from your comments that an organization like Facebook has nefarious intent? Could you glean that from?
No, I would argue, in fact, it has negative consequence, but not intent.
Okay.
Okay. And this is why I say I'm not an anti-social media guy. In fact, I think Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and WhatsApp and LinkedIn are the greatest companies that have ever been created. Okay. They have done more for society than harm. But in the long run now, we're starting to see the harms add up. And harms, like anything bad, never come in one hit and then you're done. It's slowly at first and then all at once, to quote our famous Ernest Hemingway, How I Became Bankrupt, slowly at first and then all at once. If we don't do something about this, much like climate change, eventually it's going to overwhelm us. What I'm saying is I'm the canary in the coal mine. It's starting to overwhelm us. And no, Facebook has no nefarious intent, but because of the structure of the corporation and the size of that corporation and the fact that once you have a bureaucracy in place like that, it doesn't matter if a person in the middle 22 levels down from Zuckerberg sees something. It's rarely ever going to sort of bubble up and percolate to the top. Now, does that cause damage? Possibly, and we've seen it with some of the committees that have been held in the United States where they're starting to investigate some of these things, certainly here in Canada, in Mexico. All of these countries are now really concerned about the effects these social platforms are having, which is why digital legislation is starting to come to the fore of most political fights now. It's not just about workers or jobs. Right? Now it's, hey, is digital stuff going to hurt our country? And a lot of countries are starting to now have what I call an overreaction to it. And they're starting to put in these draconian, ridiculous rules where they're trying to and by the way, again, they're not trying with nefarious intent to put this legislation in. They're genuinely trying as a government to protect their people, okay, and their things. But the problem with both parties, the government and these social networks, is it's the unintended consequences that matter most in almost everything. And I think in this case, the unintended consequences are becoming massive.
So how do you? I mean, you've got this platform, Citizen. It's from what I gleaned from the way you describe this, it's very objective. It's user friendly. It's member driven and member owned.
Yes.
How do you inoculate that from turning out to be another social media platform that can be fooled around by, let's say, a government over in Asia?
100%.
How do you do that?
So let's look at how it's done today. First and foremost, we talked before about the fact that algorithms rule.
Right.
Okay? Right now, 6 algorithms, roughly speaking.
And for the purposes of our viewers, can you tell us what an algorithm is?
So if you think about Facebook or Twitter, or you think about LinkedIn, or you think about Instagram, all of these social networks have millions and billions of users. Okay. How is it that Mark Kealey, for instance, sees only certain posts in his newsfeed and not all billion that came down all at once? It's an algorithm that makes that decision. Think of an algorithm as a gatekeeper, somebody who decides who gets in and who doesn't get in. Okay? Now, if I'm the bouncer in front of a club and I decide, only a certain type of person's going to get in, then once you're inside, that's what that place is going to look like by and large, okay? The algorithms are the bouncer, the gatekeeper. They kick out who they want to, and they keep in who they want to. And in this case, it's all about what post. Mark posted, Alejandro posted, the producer, I posted. Well, whose post makes it? So now you have to ask the question. The answer to that is very much dependent on the social network. And it's the algorithm's job to make that decision. It's not a human. So it's a series of logical constructions that tell this stays, this goes. Now, we all know that all those social networks are there to sell ads. So what they want most is for you to spend more time on the platform.
Okay.
So if the algorithm or the bouncer has the choice between the academic who has a really accurate point to make, dry and, boring, or something that says a baby died, there's blood in the street, there's a war going on, the world is coming to an end, which one do you think the social networks are going to allow into the club?
Very good point.
And that's the answer. And so all social networks today, they're not allowing the academic into the club. They're allowing the lunatic or the nutcase into the club because they know that that's going to sell more drinks, okay, or more food or more whatever. And in this case, more ads. Okay, so all of these social networks, first and foremost, have an algorithm, a bouncer, that only lets crazy making in. They don't let normal people in. They don't let mothers and aunts and uncles and fathers. And more importantly, second thing, they don't even know who these people are. So you asked, could a foreign government interfere, for instance, in Facebook? Foreign governments already use those algorithms to do flameouts in every country. So in Mexico and Costa Rica and Brazil, whoever is against you, doesn't have to be, within your country, whoever is against your country, it doesn't matter what country you are, people from outside of your country are going to be putting crazy people in front of the bouncer. The bouncer's going to say, no problem, come on in. Okay, because he wants to sell the ads. He knows that if I give the crazy person access, I'll make more money. Even if it's a Russian spy or somebody who wants to wreck your country, they don't care because they do not discriminate. And just one last piece. We will discriminate. Now, not in the way everybody thinks discrimination is bad, this sort of thing. We discriminate on the basis of we're going to know who you are. There will be no foreign actors or weird people or crazy makers. Mark Kealey will be Mark Kealey. Alejandro will be Alejandro. Murray Simser will be Murray Simser. And we will know. And so if you're going to crazy make, your reputation score goes down. And I don't have to tell you the way Uber works. If you puke in an Uber, they won't pick you up. Okay? If you act crazy on our platform, guess what's going to happen on our platform?
You're out.
Bye. Well, you're not out, but you're not going to make it. Because you're not adding to the community spirit or the civic value of the platform.
I'm trying to get into your head and sort of make our viewers understand. Does this limit the accessibility of Citizen?
Limit in the sense that it doesn't allow all things to happen on it?
Well, limited in terms of how many people you could have on it. If you're
saying, it does. Our maximum limit is, what is it? We're almost 9 billion. Yeah, 9 billion people in November this year. So our maximum amount is everybody from 13 to maximum age. We're about 7.5 billion is the total target audience of this thing. That's the limit. Every person in every country can be on it. That's it. No 3 accounts each, or I'm going to have one for work and one for this, or one for crazy making, one for work, or
and is there? You must have this whole back end that looks at all of that.
Yeah, we actually have another bouncer who decides if Mark Kealey's Mark Kealey. So the bouncer, the algorithm, will sit there and continuously police to make sure you're who you say you are.
How does Citizen make money?
Citizen makes money the same way other social networks do. We create an ad platform and we sell memberships. So just like LinkedIn has memberships, so if you want to look for a job, you buy the premium membership, or if you're a recruiter, you buy the premium membership. We're going to have the same thing. But those memberships are going to, and this is how the government actually interacts with the people.
Okay.
They buy that membership. And now they know what the people want on any question, on any subject, anytime, any day.
So let me understand this. The Republican Party buys a membership in Citizen.
Yes.
And then they'll know, they'll, for all intents and purposes, you're almost like a polling company for them.
In a manner of speaking, we are, but we're not going to replace the polling companies. This is important. We don't want to be expert at polling. What we want to do is create the giant data lake that the pollsters can interrogate.
Right.
So the pollsters would actually buy what we call an enterprise class license to our data lake. Okay, this huge pool of data that's the most accurate there is on every subject in every country. And those pollsters will then do their polling live real time within our data lake. And this will generate the revenue and the memberships to get done. So every pollster, every government employee, every staffer, every journalist person, every political staffer, every academic, every business owner is going to want a membership.
Yeah. So if I understand correctly, to try to do polling using Facebook is a bogus exercise.
You can't control the data input doing it.
And you don't know if 50 people are real.
That's correct. It's bullshit.
So yeah.
So
Okay. So that okay, fair. I've come to expect that from you. But more importantly, if you look at it in this particular case, you know the person that's on your platform. Correct. That information that they're putting is legitimate. It's considered. All of those kinds of things, and that's of value to a polling company.
It's not.
So in effect, I'm just trying to get to this point too, because I at one point I was thinking, Citizen could actually do away with polling companies. No, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, you seem to be the type of person who says, I'm going to be everybody's father confessor. I'm going to make sure that everybody is legit.
That's right.
And I'm going to make sure that even if you are in the business of polling, you come to my platform and you're going to get real objective information.
That is correct.
And that to me is going to help democracy.
Well, it's not just democracy, but polling companies in particular.
Right.
Because polling companies, the real expertise of a polling company is the ability to parse and understand that data, whether for political parties or people or whatever, okay? But today, their biggest issue is the relevance of their polls.
No, and that happens all the time. I hear that all the time.
This solves the fundamental input problem, which elevates pollsters back to the position they ought to have.
I'd say since 1988, we've seen a complete downslope or a diminution of any kind of objectivity or effectiveness of polling.
That's right.
So I think we're seeing, it doesn't matter whether you're in the United States, Canada, Mexico.
Anywhere. The whole world is seeing this problem.
There's another issue too that I think I'm hearing you say that could be resolved, and that is the level of the politician, the government, the bureaucracy are becoming more and more remote to people.
Absolutely.
And you're seeing it played out all over the place, where you made a comment at the outset where you said that a political operative had said, I don't care about the voters. We know we've got a more efficient system in our own party to get to where we're at.
Right.
So to me, it seems like it's very, very remote. And I've heard this in the United States a million times. Who cares about a general election? The primary really matters. Who cares about a general election in Canada? It's the nomination that really, really matters. So the party becomes an entity in and of itself, and they couldn't care less about democracy or elections.
Yes.
So the way I view this is I think you're saying, I'm going to help you as those who are legitimate observers of the system, polling companies and others, to render really good quality decisions and opinions, but at the same time, you're going to say, I want you as a citizen to have an active say in your government and to become less remote. Is that what I'm hearing?
Bang on. Because today, there's nothing at all to quantify the will of the people. The only thing that exists today to quantify the will of the people is the will of the politician. Okay?
Correct.
And so as a consequence, polling companies, this is a good example, polling companies used to do general polling and then sell that to people. Now they're shops for hire for political entities. And one side or the other, they're almost like target lobbyists instead.
Right.
And so there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that, shouldn't it be based on something more than just trying to get what you want? Shouldn't it be about society building and consensus building? The idea that you can just win in perpetuity and not have any consequences and not thinking about the people that are supposedly supposed to support this thing is nonsense. And we're starting to see the cost of that happening right now. This concept of remoteness is creating the conditions under which remoteness plus the destabilization of the authority, meaning this entry of social media, just like the printing press, the combination of those two things is dangerous. And it is also that which always precedes civil wars. Now, this is important because if you look at the history, when those two conditions happen, you get 200 years of war like Europe.
So are you a bit of a release valve? Citizen is a bit of a release valve?
Well, we are initially we'll lance the boil, okay? That's what we'll start with, and therefore we'll take the pressure off of the system. But then you have to heal the patient, okay? You can't just lance the boil and give them some antibiotic, okay, it's done. Then they'll have another boil in not too long, okay? They'll have some other disease that'll come back, or they won't be healthy again. you need to replace what caused that contusion or that damage with something that's not just going to release the pressure, but that's also going to elevate the people. And so that they feel power. If they feel power, they will participate. If they feel weakness, they will revolt.
So Citizen is an antidote for this. It's I don't want to say it's a competitor, it's a parallel system to what's existing today,
Correct.
Right? Okay. So if anybody wants to, how do they find out about Citizen?
So the simplest way to find out about Citizen is to Google us, Citizen with no E, and you'll see CITIZN, and you can find everything out, videos, talking points, documents, all of that's there. But the thing I would like to recommend to everybody is visit our website, citizen.world, and sign up. And on September 28th, if you're here in Canada anyway, we'll be launching here first. And thereafter, we'll be launching in the United States, Mexico, and a variety of other countries as soon as we perfect the model here in Canada, which is our home.
So the reason why you're doing this launch on the 28th of September in Toronto is because you're Canadian. You have your skunk works here in Canada.
That is correct.
And is this a pilot? Is Canada your pilot?
We're actually calling it sort of the first beta commercial launch, which means that you're sort of piloting it because you're testing it out commercially for the first time. Once, as they say, the best laid plans never survive reality. And we fully expect that once we launch this thing, as we interface to millions of people, those people and the wisdom of that crowd are going to be able to help us remodel this thing into something even better. And that continuous relationship between us and the people, because this is going to be theirs. That engine that we're creating where the people get to manage not just the algorithms, which is the bouncers, not just the privacy policies, they're also going to own and control the data. I will never be able to see it.
So anybody who's watching this right now could be a member of Citizen.
Eventually, as long as we're opening in your country, 90 countries within 5 years.
And does it cost them anything?
Cost them nothing. In fact, they'll make money off of this thing.
How do they make money?
So the way they make money is that roughly speaking, those memberships and those ads that we're going to sell on the platform, that will generate about $50 a year in revenue, okay, per user.
Okay.
So if you have 10 users, you get $50 okay. So $500 per user, okay? The point is, of that $50, about 40 is profit. Okay.
40 is profit to Citizen, to Murray Simser, to go in your pocket.
To go into Citizen's pocket. And of that number, 70% is given to the people.
70%.
70% is given to the people.
How does that work?
Well, they own the actual revenue generating entity. And so if you think about Google Play Store or Apple App Store, when a developer builds an app, Google takes 30% to run all the infrastructure and 70% is given to the developer. Right. Well, in our case, the developer, we feel, is the people. And so they will benefit from the better than supermajority of the revenue.
And so what do? You send them a check?
We put it into a fund, and they dispose of it as they see fit. So, for instance, if the citizens of a given country wanted to endow every child with a scholarship at the age of 1 year old, they could. If they wanted to give universal income to a certain class of people, they could. If they wanted to fund a moonshot and spaceships, they could. If they want to buy everybody a cell phone, they could. So, if they want to build homeless shelters, they could. And not just I demand the government to do it, because that's part of it, but also the superpower in Citizen is the people will now be rich. And when I say rich, I mean they're not going to individually get $40 a year. It's going to go into a pool.
Okay.
And that pool is going to be called Citizen Bank Mexico, Citizen, whatever. And that bank will be administered on behalf of the people by professional people who will listen to what the app says about what to do with that money. So if the people say, you know what, I'm tired of waiting for my government to solve homelessness, like we have a big homeless problem in Toronto, we're going to authorize $50 million, and we're going to build it in 3 months. We're going to stick all the homeless in there. Problem solved. This creates competition for the government. And I think it's high time the people start to take their place. We are calling this the sixth estate.
So Citizen is being launched in Canada. So you're having a party?
We're actually having, it's not us. There's a democracy summit that's actually taking place on the 28th of December. And
September.
September this year. And we opted to become a sponsor of that event, okay? And we're also going to take, because you become a sponsor, you can have some places in this event to talk. So we're going to actually launch Citizen Canada at this event. And at the moment I announce it in that event, people will be able to download it in the App Store.
So it's a for all intents and purposes, it's a conference.
It's a conference about democracy's failure, for lack of a better term.
I think it's fair to say.
We don't know what it's called yet. I'm waiting for the details from them. But it's basically the digital. What we're talking about here, the digital world is confronting democracy with a whole bunch of really big problems. And although people keep talking about it, there are very few solutions. Okay, there's a lot of pontificating and soapboxing about what the issues are, but every whiner gets up there and whines about it. And nobody has a solution. So we're actually going to be the solution at this conference, we hope. And we hope the conference leads to that, but it's going to be a whole bunch of powerful people that are going to be on panels and stuff like that, and we'll bookend that or sit somewhere.
And how can anybody go to this?
Well, it'll actually be a pretty hoity-toity event for the physical presence. There'll be between 100 and 200 really well-known people that'll be attending this thing. So I'm not sure about that. I think no, but virtually it will be broadcast, and anybody can participate and actively, not just watching.
And the intent is so that people see that this platform exists,
yes,
and they could sign up,
yes,
and they could have an impact in Citizen, and their opinion counts and matters.
And not just matters, but it's going to fundamentally alter the fabric of politics in each country. Period. The people will become the most powerful and influential group in every country immediately.
Now, I said at the outset that I know a little bit about Citizen, sure, and you and I have been friends for a long, long time. Oh. I understand you've built a sort of an ambassador program,
yes,
where you have people of noted consequence and whatever who are participating not only here in Canada but in the United States.
That's right.
Have you had outreach in places like Mexico?
We've begun that outreach, as a matter of fact. We've talked to what we try to do is not get too far ahead of ourselves. When a country becomes a target for us opening, meaning we have the funds, we have the ability, then we start to do the geography a little bit and get to know people. And what we like to do in each country, so Canada, we assembled what's called an ambassador board, okay? That ambassador board is the sort of good and great of the country. There are former ministers, huge entrepreneurs, some really well-reputed tech luminaries, big rich people, big fancy media types, authors, academics. That cohort, their job was to write the Constitution for Citizen Canada, okay? And they did that. And now we're ready to do the same. And that Constitution is what guarantees the people will ultimately own this. And it's not just some entrepreneur like me, blah, 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 to make a marketing angle. The Constitution requires, and is part of the incorporation of the company, it requires that happen. And so the job of that huge ambassador board, which is about 40 people here in Canada now, and I've worked for a couple of years to assemble that, that 40 people wrote that Constitution without my input.
On purpose.
On purpose. Because I gave them marching orders that said this company has to end up in the hands of people and it has to be done in such a way that it works. And I'm recusing myself from this discussion. I want to be a tech company. I don't want to meddle in affairs of Canada or other countries. What I want to do is build something that's going to protect democracy forever. And our mission statement is to reinforce democracy where it lives, to defend it where it's challenged, and to give rise to it everywhere else.
Well, look, we got a couple minutes left there. I'm really, really encouraged by this conversation. I've always been thinking that democracy's challenged in a lot of ways, and you have really thought this through, and you have a vision, and you certainly have a mindset that people are going to be attracted to for this. I am looking forward to your event on the 28th of September. I'm also looking forward to, I think, having more discussion with you as this continues and this sort of the domino effect of the start of Citizen in other countries. You could have a real impact on global democracy. I think that's great, Murray, and we're going to do that. Muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí. Thank you for being here. I'm really, really grateful to you, Murray, for being here. And thank you very much to Genesis for the wonderful work that they do in terms of encouraging democracy. And we'll see you next time on Punto Media. On behalf of Guillermo Cruz Rico, I'm Mark Kealey. Ciao for now.